Good evening, everybody. I'm Bronwyn Clifford and I'm the Project Manager for Marketing and Communications at Active Herefordshire and Worcestershire. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us and giving your time to complete the pre-webinar survey questionnaire. We do truly appreciate that this is an extremely challenging time for yourselves, for your organisations and your workforce as well. The point that I would really like to stress is that we are here to help. We're here to offer support and guidance, so please use us as much as possible. I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping points before we commence. Tom, if I could have the next slide, please. Perfect. So firstly, this is our first time using Zoom for webinar software. Whilst it's quite exciting and we are hoping for a seamless delivery, please bear with us because there might be a few technical glitches along the way, so we'll try our best. We would like to make the most of the functionality, so there is a chat function. Please ask questions, leave comments, feedback. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. You will have all been muted upon entry just because there's quite a few of you on the call. It might also be easier to turn off your video just to support the connection if you are able to, but I'll leave that up to you. So we do hope that the latter stages of this presentation will offer a little bit more interactivity for you. That being said, please do ask questions, make comments and provide us with your thoughts. Rosie, our project coordinator for workforce, will be monitoring the chat function throughout. And we'll be hosting a 20 to 25 minute Q&A session later on. So hopefully your questions will be answered within that. At Active Herefordshire and Worcestershire, we tend to use the motto, there's no such thing as a stupid question. So please, please, please ask away. Like to apologise in advance if we don't get around to answering all of your questions. Conscious of time, but we are due to circulate an FAQ sheet following the webinar, so hopefully that will answer any additional questions there. We'll also be recording the presentation, so if you'd like to circulate to any of your networks or other clubs, please feel free. If I could have the next slide, please, Tom. So just run through a few aims for today's webinar. Firstly, we wanted to share local and national insight and information around the kind of current state of play within the sport and physical activity sector. Arguably, the most important for us is to listen to the voice of yourselves, our community clubs and organisations, and to really understand the nature of the challenges and the types of things that you're facing on the ground. And that really is for us to identify ways in which we can best support you. And finally, we wanted to use this as a bit of an opportunity to consult with local organisations around our COVID-19 club offer. You may remember completing a club survey towards the end of last year, but obviously given the current situation, we just wanted to build on that to make sure it was relevant and act on the latest kind of concerns and information in the sector. So you will know from information sent out with your joining instructions that tonight at midnight, the Sport England Community Emergency Fund is due to be paused. So after this workshop, a few colleagues are going to stay on the call to just share some of the key messages and tips from current applications. So if you are almost at the point of submission, please hang around and we can discuss your application to support you with that. This is planned to be the first in a series of webinars delivered by Active Herefordshire and Worcestershire, which is very exciting for us. Whilst we do have ideas for upcoming topics, we're really keen to be agile and adapt to cater for your needs and answer your questions really. So if you've got any ideas, please let us know in the chat box. And finally, we are delighted to welcome Niall from Sport England. He is the, I hope I get this right, Development Manager for Clubs and Coaches, as well as our Chief Exec, Steve Brewster, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. If I could have the next slide, please, Tom. So just to give you a little bit of an update on where we are, since we went into lockdown, around 7 weeks ago now, our team have been working extremely hard to keep the wheels turning. And we've been working along the following themes. So firstly, we wanted to ensure the well-being of our workforce, both physically and mentally. Secondly, supporting the sector. And thirdly, supporting members of the public to become and remain active. So just a short introduction and brief as to what to expect from today's session. I'm now going to hand over to Niall, who will give you a national update. Over to you, Niall.
Thanks, Bronwyn. And yes, you got the title right, so thank you. Although people call me all sorts of things, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Thanks very much. Could you pop next couple of slides on, please, Tom? Thank you for letting me join this evening. It's really good to speak to clubs, community groups, volunteers out there. Just like Bronwyn said, we really appreciate this is a difficult time. Lots of unknowns. Even with the return to some sports that we're seeing now, there still is a good degree of unknowns, but also we've seen some extraordinary things from clubs and community groups. So as a thank you as well from us in terms of all the work that you do continue to do to keep things going and to support communities and your members at this time. Just a couple of updates from us, and I thought a good place to start would be around physical activity levels through coronavirus, just for interest. So we do a survey, or have been doing a survey every week of about 2,000 people to understand what people's physical activity habits. Prior to coronavirus, we were seeing record levels of people being physically active in England, which was fantastic, but we appreciate things are going to change. But across coronavirus, we've seen that adults have reported really consistent levels of physical activity. So not as much as we perhaps saw previously, but it's certainly some really good solid levels. Home-based activity were really popular in the first few weeks, and I'm sure some people on the call might have been a Joe Wicks convert for a couple of weeks and dancing around our houses and doing all sorts of stuff. We are starting to see a slight decrease in that now. I think as people have started to venture outdoors a little bit more. And outdoor activity has been really popular. 11% of cycling has been going on, 20% of running, and a massive 61% of people are regularly walking every week. So they're really strong numbers. People are really being active, and it'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops as we go forward. Volunteers and volunteering is a really big question from clubs and community groups at the moment, particularly as we come through this. We have been starting to ask questions about volunteer habits during this time. And we know that half of sports and physical activity volunteers are still volunteering, which is great. And with many stating that they continue to plan to volunteer after or through the coronavirus pandemic as we're currently in. So it's a really good, strong message. And actually we're seeing some interesting findings coming out about new people taking on different volunteering roles, a real growth in volunteering. We've seen what's happened with the NHS calling for volunteers, and actually we're interested to see how that develops into more volunteers or looking at the different roles of volunteers. However, one of the big challenges is that inequalities in physical activity habits are actually growing. So we know that people from a low socioeconomic backgrounds, BAME individuals, those with a disability and women we're seeing them being less active, particularly less active than when we were looking at figures previously as well. So it's really important that through this next phase, or the phases that the government look at, is that we continue to support a broad range of people to be active. And certainly I can see some of the groups, some of you on here, that will be supporting those types of individuals, particularly our vulnerable adults and older adults. I can see we've got some care homes on here as well, which is great. So I think we've got a really important thing about how we can support those to be active as we kind of move forwards as well. Thanks, Tom. I won't spend too much time with this. As Bronwyn said, this fund does actually, it pauses tonight. So we will we'll pause the fund tonight at midnight, or 11:59, I think is exactly what it is. These are numbers from yesterday. They have increased today, but just a bit of a nod. So our Community Emergency Fund was very much there to support the immediate emergencies that clubs, community groups, community organisations may be feeling at this time. and was really there to support those who had been left out of pocket or were still expected to pay your bills or casual staff costs through this time that couldn't be covered in other ways by government grants. And it's been really a really good process for us to go to. We've been able to support a lot. Ordinarily, Sport England receives about 4,500 applications per year across all of our investment streams. We are way past 10,000 applications received. It says 9,883 on there. We are past 10,000 applications received. So it's been a mammoth effort to really get this going. We've assessed probably almost about 75% of those. And again, that's taken an awful lot of manpower to get that done, but we've been able to turn it around as quick as we've kind of said. And we've approved over 5,000 applications, so it's slightly more that's on there as well, with the average award amount around 3,700. You'll see there that over 17 million has been awarded so far. The original pot for this was 20 million. And on Monday, we announced we're extending the pot to 35 million to ensure that we can support as many as possible that are in the system. Next on. So I just thought I'd pop this up there. And really, this is, for those of you, this isn't just about looking at the Community Merger Fund. This is learnings for any sort of application that you might do towards funding, and really important things that we've seen through this in particular that we've come through. So in terms of what's worked really well, I think, because that's probably the best place to start with this, is what's worked really well in applications, and this is range true for any funding applications, a really clear, concise picture of who you are, what you do, your size and your scale of what you're trying to do or what you do. And when we say a clear picture, it's kind of, you don't need to give us lots of paragraphs and tell us your back history. Actually, things like bullet points are really useful. They're really concise. They get to the point and they really help an assessor understand who you are, what you're doing in a really quick way. With this particular fund, we found applicants who can give a really clear picture of why they needed the money, which is linked in this case to the bills. But actually that rationale doesn't need to be super long. It's just really concise, really clear about, we can give a clear picture of what we needed to pay, for example, over the next few months, and this is therefore why we need what we need. And this is something that comes up as well on lots of funding applications about savings or reserves. It's absolutely okay to have reserves as a club or as a community group or as an organisation. Savings reserves are very, very prudent to have. And we got lots of questions on this particular fund about, well, if I've got savings, surely I can't apply? And it's, well, absolutely, yes, you can, because we're in an extraordinary time and your savings are there to support you in other extraordinary times. So as long as you can make it really clear why you can't use the savings for this particular investment or any funding that you're looking for, then that's okay. And lastly, and I know it sounds a bit simple, it doesn't mean to be, but meeting the criteria for funding, really read that criteria when you're looking for funding, because it saves a lot of time and it really makes it focused on what you're kind of looking and what you're trying to do. Thanks, Tom. I just thought I'd drop these in there, some key thoughts, and we haven't got all the answers as to what we're looking to do or where we're looking to go. Clubs and community groups might look different and post-coronavirus. They currently look different throughout the coronavirus, and we know that there are some who are already back to activity and starting to play now, and they're having to really change what we're doing. We know that we're going to have a long period where some can take part, some might not be able to take part, and we're going to have really staggered taking part in lots of activities. I think it's important to remember that this is okay. It's okay to do things a bit differently through this period and post this. We may see a real shift and real change, and hopefully we'll get back to where we were previously, but it's to kind of say things will be a bit different and we'll get through that. The second thing there is about working together is critical. We all want to see all sports return, and it's really, and obviously it's positive that certain sports and activities are coming back. So water sports in particular, golf has started to come back, which is fantastic. But in order for other sports to come back, speak with other clubs and with other sports potentially local to you. find out about how they're potentially dealing with it. There's a lot of value in sharing between sports and between clubs during this time, and what they're all doing. The value of people volunteering continues to really shine through. And that is to say that what we're seeing from some clubs is, and probably a lot of the clubs on this call, is using technology to reach out to members, keeping in touch, keeping people active, keeping people sane with lots of quizzes, although I think quizzes are somewhat becoming a bit boring, but we're getting there. But we're seeing lots of volunteers from clubs reaching out to their communities as well and doing some excellent stuff with communities. So it may well see that we see a real new generation of volunteers coming through, but actually continue to support all the people who were supporting your organisation moving forward. Thanks, Tom. Last one, I think. So further support from Sport England. We've got lots of information on our website in terms of how we're tackling coronavirus and what we're trying to do. In terms of sector stimulation, I wouldn't say we're completely out of the first emergency phase, but we are definitely starting to look forward. And you can see on our website about some sector stimulation, and that may involve in the future some further support, some further guidance around how we can get going again and how we can support organisations and clubs to get going. Club Matters is resources that the guys will talk about later, but it's free guides, toolkits, case studies and workshops that's there to support clubs and community groups. And they are available absolutely free to you. I think Active Hereford and Worcestershire refers to them on the website, and the guys are going to talk a little bit about what we can do with those later. Sport England Advice Hub. So on our website, we have a new advice hub, which is starting to look at some of the more meaty things. So it gets into a bit more of the safeguarding. We're talking a lot more about online activity, but also things around governance and legal structures as well, which links into Club Matters. And last but not least, our Join the Movement campaign, which some of you may have seen, and certainly Bronwyn mentioned earlier about we kind of keeping active. We really want to support people to keep moving through this phase, however they choose to do it, whether it's in their home, whether it's going for a walk, or however it is. It's really great to see so many people continuing to be active. So our Join the Movement campaign gives you lots of tips, ideas around how you can keep people moving and keep people active. And that will continue to operate over the next couple of months as we kind of more information flows out. So that's it from me. I have seen there's a couple of questions, but I'm going to pass to Steve, I believe, or Brett to Bronwyn first. I'm not sure.
Yeah, over to Steve, please.
Cool, over to Steve.
Sorry, I'm just trying to unmute the mic. Tom, flip on to one more. I'm going to try and pick up the question from Elsa in terms of, wouldn't this be good to have done before the closing date? We only found out Monday that it was coming to a close, but the emergency funding available from Sport England is only part of the picture as One Eye moves to, if I dare say, not recovery, but starting to, and I hate the term, the new normal. So that isn't the end of the story. It might be the end of that particular emergency fund, but it's not the end of the story. I'll leave Niall to pick up the other question. Flick on one more, Tom, please. We have had a huge amount of applications made to the emergency fund. And some of them have been rejected. Now I'll allow Niall to add, is they didn't really need it. It wasn't an emergency. So some of them have got rejected on that case. And that's not the case for all, but it's just some of the key reasons why they may not have been successful. You flick on one more, Tom. So, but we have benefited enormously. That's £284,000 into Herefordshire and Worcestershire, which is an enormous investment and blows the average small grants total completely out the water. And we do have to remember that before this, we had the flooding, because we've had a fantastic year across Herefordshire, Worcestershire, and a number of clubs did benefit from the Urgency Flood Relief Fund as well. So this isn't, again, the total investment across Herefordshire and Worcestershire. This is just on this particular funding stream. If you flick on one more, Tom. So there has been other support. So in terms of the emergency flood, emergency COVID responses, there's also been support from national government. So those asset owning or lease owning clubs should have benefited from the retail, hospital and leisure grants. If you employ people, you should have benefited from, or certainly considered, the pros and cons of furlough, and of course statutory sick pay for those that are on sick leave due to COVID-19. So there has been a huge response, and some of the NGBs or associated charities have also launched emergency packages around this unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in. But this is, again, just part of the journey. What we're trying to get, and this evening and the survey accompanying it, is really to get a true understanding of the issues that are there. Whether it's today I need help to do X, Y, Z, or as we emerge from this, how do I get the club back up and running? What does my sport look like, or what does my activity look like with social distancing? How do I adapt? How do I change? What help and support advice is out there? This is what we want to hear, so we can adapt our offer back to responding to the needs of the community out there. So it's really important that we get your feedback. It's really important that we get a true understanding, so we can adapt what we do to best support the sector. Just touching on some of the initial statistics, if you flick on one more, Tom. Those that are furthest from physical activity as a result of social isolation and staying at home have got further away still from physical activity. So whilst those that were active, or certainly thinking about being active, have taken the running shoes out the cupboard or the bike out the shed, those with long-term health conditions, or those with disabilities, or those from lower socioeconomic groups, or Black and ethnic minorities, have become further away from physical activity, and there is more immediate help being galvanised behind the scenes around those. So if you work in those areas, or if you work with those communities or that demographic, please get in touch with us so we can discuss that a little bit further. It's not going to be an open application process as emergency funds, but there may be some help that we can provide, but it's part of that conversation, and this is an ongoing conversation. There is no playbook to this. With all our best intentions, we are making this up as we go. So what are the issues? Please tell us what the issues are, and we'll do our best to respond, or at the very least signpost to other opportunities. So enough rambling from me, and we'll get to the more interesting part of Q&A. Back to you, Bron.
Thank you, Steve, and to Niall as well. I think we'll all agree that was really insightful to see the investment in our two counties. And also, as you mentioned, Steve, that's just one part of the picture. So lots of work going on in the background, lots in the pipeline. So continue to watch this space. We're now going to move into a 20 to 25 minute Q&A session. I think Rosie and Simon have been grouping your questions into themes. So we'll hopefully cover a lot of ground there. Conscious of timescales, I'd just like to mention that FAQ document that will be circulated after the webinar. So yeah, we'll do our best. So we do want this to be kind of as interactive as possible. So I'd like to invite you to use the chat function to ask any further questions that you might have for Steve, Niall, or both. Rosie, are there any points coming through?
This is Simon here. We have had a question from, which was asked earlier on, about the 60% approval rate on the application seems really low, and just why is the number so low, whether there were any reasons from that, whether Niall is able to give any insight. I know he spoke about top tips.
Yep, cool. Thank you. Cheers, Simon. Hi, Andy. Haven't seen you for quite a while, but nice to hear from you. So it's around 70%. The numbers are a bit off from where we are at the moment, but we're around just under a 70% approval rate, which actually is for any fund that we do. I think that's rather high at the moment. In terms of why the 30% perhaps not. The common challenges we've had with people coming to us is kind of, first of all, we ask people to look for government support first. So if they hadn't looked and gone for government support and were eligible for that and didn't access it, that's where they needed to go first of all. We had some clubs that were kind of applying for just in case rather than the emergency situation. People who were sitting on very large reserves. So I said earlier about, a moderate level of reserves is fine, but we've had some clubs come to us with large reserves, and it's kind of like, it's not justifiable. So that's why we've kind of said no to some of them as well. And also we had some people who kind of wanted to carry out maintenance, whereas this was very much about the emergency at the moment, things that you had to pay for, whereas things like maintenance and essential stuff, things like extra maintenance wasn't necessarily always needed. So yeah, it's just, that's kind of where we are. So, but the 70% actually is quite high, particularly for this fund. We've never had to do anything on this scale before. And yes, so there you go. Hope that helps.
I've had another question which has come in. I'm not sure who wants to answer. Oh, sorry. To answer this. There was a statement which we will take on board, that the resource and the green from a bowling club has lost income and materials and bill still need to buy materials and bills to pay for repairs, which are essential for them to continue. So in response to Steve's comment earlier on about what is the help that you need, they need the help to pay the bills. So the bowling club in the green is critical for that. There is a question which has come from a swimming club which has lost income. Swimmers have either had to cancel, reduce or suspend their fees as they're impacted by COVID-19. But the club still needs to pay the bills. And they also want guidance on getting the club back up and running when pools are allowed to open again, and how to do this on a training and how then to start attracting new members again. Sorry, there's a number of questions in there.
I'll start with that one, Niall.
Yeah,
in terms of, do have a look at the Swimathon Foundation website, because it's exactly what it's been set up to do. Recognising that swimming clubs tend not to be asset-owning clubs, that has launched a hardship fund to help. So have a look at their website, have a look at the criteria. Please come back to us if you don't fit the criteria or it's still an issue. This is an ongoing conversation. I can't promise that we have a checkbook that we can actually dip into, but certainly we can actually do our very best to help. In terms of swimming pools opening up again, they are locked in or thrown into in terms of the hotel and hospitality sector. So I know leisure providers or pool providers are proactively looking at ways they can open up their facilities again when they're given the green light to do so. But hopefully they'll be given enough notice to be able to activate that and actually communicate with their users in terms of the new rules associated with it. So hopefully that touches on that. I appreciate life is difficult in the club setting. In terms of, what was the third part of the question, Simon? Sorry. Standing clubs back up once pools are allowed. Yes, I mean, goes back to the providers actually looking at and planning for reopening their facilities. And I know they are proactively looking at how they do that. But it will be pool by pool in terms of the facilities that you use. In terms of standing clubs back up or getting them ready for that, as you can imagine, this situation is moving very fluidly. Like I said before, there's no playbook to this, so people are sort of making it up as they go, and guidance tends to change quite quickly. But hopefully there will be news about how we reactivate clubs in the foreseeable future. Niall, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think Emily from Bromsgrove is doing a sterling job bigging up Swim England, because that was kind of what I was going to do. Is just say Swim England have been doing an awful lot as well, working with leisure providers to look at what the options are for coming back. And I know there is a lot of talk around how swimming can be brought back safely, in the same way that how can we bring back gyms safely and indoor facilities. So yes, I believe that Swim England are in contact with people like DCMS as well, which is the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who would kind of advise the government. So it's absolutely within people's thoughts and feelings to give you some confidence. One thing I'd probably just keep your eye on is something like UK Active. So UK Active are the body who look after a lot of our leisure providers across the UK. They put out a really interesting framework last week, which it's only 6 pages long, but you'll if you look at that and you operate in a leisure facility or an indoor facility, you might just find it interesting as to what kind of things they're suggesting to government might be the right ways and to support these facilities to reopen. So yes, there we go.
Great, thank you. I think Rosie, you've got a couple of questions coming to you.
Yeah, so there's been a comment about losing members in specific sports. So are there any suggestions for keeping in touch with members so they don't lose them during the lockdown?
Steve, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Yes, I appreciate it's an issue, and people's habits potentially will change. But what we're also finding, and statistics are a devil really in it, but people are thinking differently about their activity. So whilst yes, you might lose some members, you might actually get members back in. I think it's really important, and I know this is easier said than done, to keep communicating with your membership in terms of whether it's about top tips on skitting and staying active, or whether it is literally just keeping them informed in terms of what's happening behind the scenes, that you are preparing for the future, you have got one eye on the future, please stick with us and things like that. So easier said than done, I do fully appreciate, but Sport England, national governing bodies and active partnerships like ourselves have done an enormous amount of work gathering in terms of tips and to stay active. And it could well be that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you just need to signpost to existing resources that are out there. But again, please get in touch if you need additional support or help on that. Anything to add, Niall?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Steve said. We appreciate that sort of keeping in touch has to be a lot done virtually, and not everyone can access virtual sort of support. So, we've had great examples of clubs just setting up maybe a WhatsApp group, dropping a weekly text or bi-weekly, or twice a week text to some of their members. But as remember trying to stay in touch with parents. So if you've got kids clubs, so I know the gymnastics, Elle from gymnastics, or it might be Ellie, so apologies, talked about gymnastics. So staying in touch with parents is really useful as well. And I think that's just really important. I think the guys can talk about club matters later, but I've just popped a link in the chat about how you can communicate and engage as a virtual club. But also remember that actually there could be more, we don't know for certain, but there could be more people that really want to get involved in physical activity. So don't be afraid to reach out to other people, invite other people. If you're going to do a club quiz, feel free to them to bring family or friends along. Always try and think, actually, we might be able to engage a few more people through this, or different people through this as well. I know it's difficult to be positive, but there is the opportunity that might happen.
Fantastic, thank you both. I think, as well, there are plans in the pipeline to deliver more support and webinars and one-to-one support as well around that kind of topic. So keep your eyes peeled. Rosie, did you say you had another question coming in?
Yeah, so there's two in the chat at the minute. If they have a problem with the assessment of their application for a grant, who do they speak to and where do they get further support?
Niall, do you want to take that one?
That's for me. So if you have applied for the Community Emergency Fund and you haven't been successful, you should be able to, there's an email address on there, you should be able to email and then they will give you feedback from what's going on. I think after that, it might be worth speaking to the guys at Active Herefordshire and Worcestershire around what other options could be available to you. And I know the guys have talked about further funding support going forward, sort of funding and advice, I should say, is the right way to say that.
Great.
One thing I would add, Bron, is when you get chief medical advisor standing next to the Prime Minister and say exercise is really good, it's a message that we've not really had from senior levels of politicians in the past. That they're saying your biggest weapon in your armory to fight this is to be physically active and fit. So I appreciate I'm clutching at grains of good news in amongst all of this, but it is a clear message that exercise is good for us, something we've known all along, but suddenly the Prime Minister and others are saying it on a national stage.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I couldn't agree more. Simon, have you got a couple of short ones there?
Yeah, let me ask you a couple. Firstly, is it possible to get sport-specific information relating to the applications, number of applications, whether they're successful and unsuccessful?
Is it possible to get sport-specific? You can get we published all of the data on our website. So if you go to sportengland.org and go to coronavirus and the funding page, there's a little tool you can use to have a look at sports to go specific. In terms of the more kind of qualitative or detail of why people have been successful, I'm afraid that would be going directly through your governing body. It's not the kind of information we'll be able to give out.
I know it's a question straight from Steve. Sorry, Steve. Yeah, I can send you some stuff offline outside of this, so no problem.
There was another question, and I don't know whether Steve or Niall can help in terms of advising the government on how clubs can be stood up again once the lockdown starts to ease, how that happens and who does that?
Can I start with that one, Niall? I think this is partly the purpose of us trying to engage with you. I appreciate the technology. The way we're engaging is very different, but it's about intelligence and us feeding through. So if you're telling us, we can feed it through to Sport England, who then feeds it on to the government and others. And it's about that shared intelligence, and they're looking for those common themes. So it's really important that you tell us what the issues are, so we can collectively feed that through, because we are being asked to provide that intelligence upwards, whether it's leisure providers, sports clubs, or some of the voluntary sector that have physical activity as part of what they do, not just the sole thing what they do. And we've been asked again and again to actually feed intelligence through. So it's important that you let us know what the issues are, and we can feed that through and hopefully respond to it in a positive way and help you find solutions. Anything to add, Niall?
No, Steve is absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. We talk to DCMS every single day, and clubs, coaches, volunteers, sole traders, professional workforce are very much on the agenda about how can we do this. So yeah, can I just one really quick thing with Jenny, who said bowls during sent us back to Sport England. It feels like you're being bounced around a bit. If you, I think you probably, if you get in touch with the guys at Active Herefordshire and Worcestershire, I think they might be able to kind of at least start to get towards some of the challenges and hopefully help and direct you in the right way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry.
Are there any
I've just got one. There was a question that Andy asked, which I think has been answered. I just want to double check that. You asked about any good practice that can be shared about keeping juniors to make sure that they carry on, because there could potentially be 18 months. I'm hoping that through Niall's response, Steve, Bron, and also from Jenny, that you've had the answer to that one.
Sorry,
can I just...
It was more about the junior side. So there's a lot of information in terms of contact for adults, but it was more a case of juniors obviously safeguarding their contacts and going through parents, but just was there any best practice that anyone had done other than Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc.?
Andy, I think in terms of what I've seen from other clubs and what's been going on, there's a couple of things that might help give some clarification. So the CPSU, which is the Child Protection and Sport Unit, have put some guidance out around kind of safe practice when you're working digitally with young people. But clearly working directly with young people through digital means is not always the best way to do it. So I've seen lots of clubs doing things around family challenges, family ways of, it might be family dances, it might be family cricket, and you're probably aware of the new app that's come out from the ECB today, the Dynamos app, which is targeting cricket skills in the home for young people as well. So whether you as a club could do anything around that to kind of promote the app and say, actually, can you do this as a family? Can you then kind of report back in terms of how it's going, and you kind of just maintain that engagement? That's how we've seen a lot of young people be supported, is mainly through parents, just because it's the safest way to do things.
Just to add, there's been some of you may be aware of a program called School Games, and the School Games offices that are scattered around the 2 counties. They've been tasked with establishing challenges, and they're coming out thick and fast and around school games. So it's predominantly through the school system, but it is about trying to keep young people engaged and active across a variety of issues. I appreciate that not everyone's a fan of Joe Wicks, although I think my children are coming to the end of their attention span with him. It's been a fantastic resource. And the fact that they're on the website forever and ever and ever, on YouTube forever and ever, means you can go back and actually try it, not just at 9 o'clock every morning. So it's a little bit of, we're making it up as we go. Unprecedented, use all the buzzwords around to establish it, but it's about trial and error.
Fantastic, thank you.
Nicole raised a really good question. She mentioned that a key issue for them going forward is that 80% of their members are over 70 and 40% have a disability. And it's critical that they don't lose muscle build by not bowling for 3 months or longer. What guidance is there out there for those specific demographics, or how can they maintain fitness at home?
If I could pick that up, on our website, and we will circulate all the links and the PowerPoints, and I think, as Bron said, we are recording it. On our website, we've launched something called 6 and 6. So it's basically exercises that are targeted towards that demographic in terms of trying to keep and stay active whilst in isolation or just staying at home. It's not a replacement for bowls. It is just a way of keeping people moving. Some of it's chair based, and there's different easy, difficult, hard, so you can adapt it to the individual's ability. We will do a specific link directly to that page within the website, but feel free to use that and circulate it to your members.
Can I just add on that, Steve? The Activity Alliance have developed a lot of really useful inclusive resources as well, so might be one to look at. And also a number of charities involved with the We Are Undefeatable campaign, so looking at a lot of disabilities and long-term health conditions. A lot of the charities involved in that have released a number of resources suitable for different conditions and things. So depending on individual circumstances, it might be worth looking at that as well. Niall, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, you took it. You Bromley, you took what I was going to say out of my mouth. I popped the link to the Activity Alliance and their step activities, how to adapt activities on there as well. Fantastic.
Rosie, Simon, anything else coming through, or are we happy to move on?
No more questions that I've seen.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay. Fantastic. I believe Steve is just going to run through some of the key themes coming out of the pre-webinar survey. If I can pass over to Steve, please.
Bear with me a second while I pull up the the notes. Bear with me. Okay, Tom, can you flick on? Okay. So keeping the lights on. Yes, we appreciate that keeping the club's volunteers engaged, coaches engaged. It's an important issue that I appreciate that everyone's wrestling with. Like Niall said, whether it's the quiz evening or whether it is just tips and hints on exercises they can do that they can keep going. It is really, it's one of the key issues, and I believe we've got a webinar later in July that are looking at that specifically. I guess following the guidance, sorry, my notes have just disappeared. Following the guidance in terms of, especially, we've had a number of calls since Monday saying, or can I do this, or can I do that? It's really keeping that 2 meter distance and going with one other person that's not from your household. If you keep that principle in hand, then yes, a game of tennis is fine. A game of golf with one other person or with someone from your household, assuming that the facilities you want to use are actually open. I know some of the golf courses have started to open up, but and some of the tennis clubs, but you need to be clear that the facilities are open, and certainly practical issues like, can I go to the loo? So the courts might be open, but are the facilities actually open? So it's doing your best to following the guidance especially when it's a little bit ambiguous, but doing our best. Starting to grow and looking to the future, and I know this is difficult, but as the emergency element, it has been, we've not passed it, but you know what I mean. We've sort of gone past the peak of the issue, the mad running around we've done to sort of making sure that friends, relatives, and loved ones and those most vulnerable are looked after. But now we can actually start to look at our volunteer base and start looking at what's online in terms of training. Hypothetically, in terms of, okay, I've been meaning to get everyone through their safeguarding training. I just never got around to it. This is the perfect opportunity to actually get everyone to do that, especially as a lot of the training is actually moving online. And spreading the news and staying physically active is really important. And actually us understanding what the issues of the day are is really quite crucial in terms of us feeding back into the system to actually, hopefully, that we can influence the direction of travel moving forward. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Tom? So we've got webinars planned, keeping your members through the current crisis and things like that. But the Club Matters, there is an enormous amount of online support there. And I know a colleague from Netball over in Herefordshire specifically said, okay, we've decided as a committee that this is the opportunity to sort our governance out. We've been making, do and mending for some time. This is an opportunity to actually just look at that and say, okay, what are we in terms of governance? And there are resources out there to help guide and advise. And we are here to help guide and advise as well. So please tell us what the issues are and when we can react. Some of these courses are online. Some of them we can actually facilitate. We can actually say, okay, there's enough people in Herefordshire, Worcestershire to warrant one of these specifically. But again, we need to know what those issues are. So there's plenty of support through Club Matters. You flick on again, Tom. Advice available from sector partners. So yes, SIMSA in terms of training, UK Active has been mentioned in terms of, especially in this context around swimming clubs. The National Council for Voluntary Organisations, there's an awful lot of advice, guidance. Sometimes, and I've certainly found this in the first few weeks, is there was so much information coming towards me, I couldn't actually keep up. webinar on this, webinar on that, keep on this, advice and guidance on this. But it's, I guess, navigating through the maze and actually just picking from the menu. And there are other funding. A lot of the charitable fundings, community lottery, sporting lottery, have reacted in an emergency setting. But some of the funding streams from charities are starting to look to rebuilding for the future. So while some community foundations or national grants are in the short term focused on the more immediate priorities, they will open up again. So it's being clear. I think one of the survey, one of the responses back is one of the issues is funding. My question back to that always is funding for what specifically? Is it about training? Is it about equipment? Is it about facilities? What is it we need funding for? So it's being very clear and specific about why you need funding. If you flick on again, Tom. And as I've mentioned a few times, they've got upcoming planned webinars. So I think we've been touched on this, keeping your members active. I think there's been, we touched on that through the Q&A, attracting funding in the current crisis and beyond. So they're one-to-one sessions that are set up and others. I won't read it verbatim, but yeah, there is advice off the shelf in terms of, but your feedback in terms of us being able to tailor that support, advice, guidance, whether that's through a one-to-one conversation, whether that's through accessing some of the programs that we already have, or whether it's about tailoring some very specific support. We just need to keep the conversation going, and we need you to feed back to us. That's probably about it. Is there any more? I don't think there's any more slides. Anything to add, Niall?
I think that's all covered.
Okay. Have I missed anything from the Bron, Rosie, and the team?
Not from my end, Rosie, Simon.
A question's just come through saying, how can we book onto these webinars?
All of the webinar information will be released tomorrow. We will also, so we'll be sending an email tomorrow, hopefully, with the club survey, just in case it hasn't yet been completed. So again, really keen to gather your feedback and insight at a local level to tailor our support package. And also the other webinars, if you do have any ideas for webinars that you'd like to see, please let us know. We will also be asking you to complete a short evaluation form. Like I said earlier, this is the first time we've run a Zoom webinar, so any positive comments, constructive criticism, anything is welcome. Yeah, we're really keen to improve, so we'll also circulate the link to the recording with booking details for future webinars and things. And then next week we will be looking to answer all your questions with the FAQ, so keep an eye on that one probably towards the end of next week. I think that's everything from me. Anything to add, Rosie? Simon?
Yeah, could I just add that as exciting as these webinars will be and as supportive as they will be, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us, especially I'm more than happy to help out clubs with my role as within workforce. So if you have any questions, concerns that aren't covered in the upcoming webinars, like Bron said at the beginning, no question is a silly question, so please get in touch and I'll help as best as I can.
Fantastic, thank you. So I guess all that's left to say is a very big thank you to everybody, and just a reminder that our Active HW colleagues will be staying on the line afterwards. So if you've got any kind of unanswered questions that have cropped up, if you'd like to discuss any applications that you're looking to submit tonight, just stay on the line with us.